Hi guys, welcome to Learn with W3 Schools. My name is Dr. Zishan Bhatti, and today we're going to talk about one of the most confusing concepts that most young developers tend to have about JavaScript variables. That is, knowing the difference between let, var, and constant. So in this video, we're going to explore and see the difference between each and clearly identify within JavaScript variables what is the let, what is var, and what is constant, where to use let, where to use var, and where to use constant to declare JavaScript variables. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, as discussed, we're going to dive much more detail into this JavaScript variables today. So, try to understand and be an open mind with it so that you can understand the difference between each of these variables and or how to use them. Okay, so we'll start with the basics of what variables are, when each var, let, or constant to be used. Along the way, we'll also try to solve some of the real world problems so that you can understand exactly how these things are working in real life. And we'll try to do some and we'll let you know some how to avoid some common mistakes as well. So, right. So by the end, you will hopefully understand what are variables, how to use them, and in which scenario to use each var, let, and constant for that matter. Okay, and you will become quite pro and clear about these concepts. So by the end of this course, you will master the JavaScript variables. You will not only understand the technical stuff, but also know how to apply it in the real coding example scenarios, right? Just we're going to walk you through these examples as well. So I'll try to focus on this var, let, and constant specifically in this video, and I'll talk about hoisting scopes and even write small, cool examples so that you can understand the difference in within each sense. Okay, so let's begin. Now, what exactly do we mean by variables? Well, variables are a container for storing data. Okay, they label data for easy access and manipulations. So, the basic idea is again very simple. So, if you consider data, which is for example 10, so we need to save this 10 inside the memory. To do that, we know that memory is a block of codes inside our system, inside our chips. So, we have hard disk or SSDs. They basically contain these blocks and the data needs to go inside each of these blocks in typically a binary form. Okay, so it's 101010 form which represents the data. But now in order to read this data that we have just stored inside a memory, we need some reference point, and that reference point is actually known as variables in programming. Okay, so for example, when we declare a variable x is equals to 10, this means that I have saved data 10 inside a memory, and now in order to access this variable, I will be using a variable called x. So this x is basically a way of accessing the data from memory and between the JavaScript. Okay, so we have a JavaScript. So using this variable x, JavaScript is able to access the data from memory. And similarly, from memory, we pass the data to the variable x, and then which is passed to the JavaScript code. So here we are doing exactly the same thing. We have variable x is equals to 10. So x is data, which is saved inside this variable x, which again is pointing to the memory location. So then using this x, I am passing the data to the JavaScript, which is actually printing the data on our console. So that's how it basically works. So it is also considered as a way of organizing your data so that your code doesn't look like a spaghetti mess. So everything within it is organized and well structured. Remember, in this case, the data can hold, or the variables can hold any type of data, from strings to characters to byte, short, float, double, and so on and so forth. The basic advantage of variables. Variables are like your personal assistants. They keep track of all the information. You don't have to remember every tiny detail. Okay. So imagine writing a program without variables. Yikes. Yeah. So you end up repeating yourself everywhere. So for example, if I have 10 inside a memory, every time I have to use it, I have to use 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Technically, inside a computer programming, this 10 is different, this 10 is different, this 10 is different, this 10 is different. For every time I use the variable 10, it actually is storing in a different memory space at runtime inside your ROM or RAM. That's what we basically mean. So that's why when I access this 10 as x, I save it inside a variable x. Now it means every time I use x, 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 it is always pointing to the same memory location. Okay, so rather than every variable being different, every time you use x, it's actually pointing to the same thing. That's why we say it simplifies the code readability. It allows the reuse of data without this repetition. So this is a big no-no. So by saving a data inside a memory and assigning a variable name to it, basically we are reusing the data. Okay, so it allows us to do this dynamic programming. Now using this X, I can do multiple information. I can perform mathematical calculations on this data. So it's going to read the value of X and do the calculation on it. I can print the value of X inside our log file or whatever operations I want to do. Okay, so it becomes very powerful that now I'm just reusing and dynamically updating the content as well. So now let's go into the syntax of variables. So here's a basic syntax of declaring variables. It's pretty straightforward. Use var for old school declarations. Okay, so previously an old way or older declaration we used to do var. Don't worry, we'll go into detail of each of them in coming slides. So let for most modern needs. So most modern time, this is the now like it's considered as a newer way of doing it. Constant is just like a fancy way of saying that hey, I have a variable but its value remains fixed. I don't want to change it. Okay, so this is the typical way of declaring it. We declare a var or let or constant. We provide a variable name, which is again same, and then some value. Okay, this value can be of type integer. It can be of type, for example, string. It can be of type, for example, boolean. It can be of type, for example, float, and so on and so forth. Oops, spelling mistake. So float float. Okay, again, more about these types in a detailed lecture I've already posted. Check out my channel. If you're still having confusions of how to work with data types, let me know and I will post a new video on that. Okay, so this is how we basically declare and we define the syntax. Okay, now let's get into detail of each of this. So if we start with first the var. Var is like a wise but outdated elder version of JavaScript. It's a functional scope, always called it's a scope within a function, meaning it's accessible throughout the function, but it's hoisted, moved to the top of its scope. So you can end up with some weird behavior if you're very if you're not very careful. So yeah, use it very carefully. Okay. So what we mean by this is if I have a function, okay, so every time we declare a variable x, it's only declared inside this x. It's what we call a function scope. Means that this block of code represents the function. If any variable declared inside here is only used inside it. So even though if I have console x, but this is considered, this will generate an error undefined. This is correct. And then when I use it now, there's no error here. Why? Because it's only accessible after the declaration. Before the declaration, if you use it, it creates a problem. That's why we call it functional scope. Second, it's only available within the brackets. So we need to use it very carefully. So here's a classic problem with the var. Because it's functional scope, the I variable keeps its value after the loop ends. Okay. So to fix this, we use the let, which is a blocked scope, meaning it stays within the loop iteration, easy win. So for example, here, if I come inside the loop, the for I loop, I is equals to 0, I less than 5, I plus plus, and if I set time out, every time we print the function, console.log will always print 5555555. Okay, because again we are using the arrow function here to determine which values we want to print. So this will actually only always print 5555. Why? Because it's functional scoped. It's only within the function the value is basically being changed. However, when we use the let is considered as a blocked scope. For the same code, now we have a completely different result. Okay, see the difference. So that's why we need to understand how var and let are behaving. This is a functional scope, means it's only within the particular function. Here, it's what we call a variable is a block scope. So now when I declare I, its value is actually changing because the yi is considered using the let. So let is like the millennials code. It's a modern way of doing it. It's efficient and not prone to mistakes like its predecessor. It's a blocked scope. It's not a functional scope. It's called a blocked scope. Means it only lives within the brackets. So anything you declare inside the brackets always sticks inside the brackets. It's not accessible outside it. That's what a block means. A function basically means anything you declare inside a function is just accessible inside that function only. no, like the var thing. But let is considered as a blocked scope. So it's declared inside a block. The block scope, which basically means it only lives within this block. Plus, it's stricter, right? It's very strict about a redeclaration as well. Okay, that's the second thing. It does not allow redeclaration. Var does. So, for example, if you declare let age is equal to 30, you change the value of age 31, that's completely allowed because you're just updating the variable. But then if you redeclare it, it's not allowed. This is going to generate error. Why this will be an error? This is a big no-no because it's going to say, hey, listen, age has already been declared. You cannot redeclare it. But if in this case, if I set this to be a var and I declare age is equals to 30, then again I can go and I can say, hey, age is equals to 31. This is perfectly legal in terms of var. Var allows us redeclaration, but let does not. Second, it's only block scope. So let's see an example of it. So here's a scoping issue you might run into with the let. Blocking scope means that a variable only exists inside the block it's declared in. If you need it outside, just declare it higher up. Simply put to it. So for example, if I have if, I've just set it to true, a default condition, and I declare a variable here, let message is equals to hello. Because this is a block scope, remember I told you just sticks inside the block. Means that now outside the block, if I go and print this variable message, this will generate an error. That's the bigger problem. Now we cannot access this message outside the block. However, in order to solve this issue, then we need to declare this variable outside it. So this is called variable declaration. We only declare it outside the block so that now I can use it. Okay, so see this, there's no let here now. It just says message hello because the message variable has been declared somewhere around here above the block. That's what one thing is. That's how sometimes let can create a problem. Now let's understand the constant. Constant is like a stubborn friend who won't change their opinion. It's immutably fixed. Great for constants like pi or a configuration variables. But remember, objects and arrays declared with const can still have their contents changed. Okay, we'll show you an example of that. So what it basically means, it's an immutable. It's a blocked scope, just like the let. Must be initialized during the declaration. That's another thing. That's how it's differentiate. You cannot just declare it. Just in the previous example, I showed you how you can declare let, but const cannot. You must redeclare it, and it cannot be changed. It cannot be assigned. Its value remains fixed. Okay, so now we define const with the constant variable. The variable name is here is equals to its value. Once you set it as a constant, now this cannot be changed. In other words, this value. So if you change it to pi to something else, now they will generate an error. Okay, that's what constant means. It's immutable. It also follows the same blocked scope logic that it's blocked. Then you cannot say, hey, I want to have a constant pi here and I want to assign its value somewhere else. So pi value I want to say 3.1. This is not allowed because this means I have a constant variable and now I'm changing its value in the second step, which is again not allowed because it's immutable. You cannot change its value. So that's what we say. So you cannot just declare a value. It must be initialized. That's what the logic here means. Means you always need to give it a value. You cannot just do a simple declaration. You can do this with let, you can do this with var, but not the constant. Okay, so if I see a simple problem of immutable objects, if I have a constant number 1, 2, 3, numbers dot push 4 allowed, which basically means that even though if I have a constant, I'm assuming that this constant value should not change. But see, it's changing. This is completely allowed because this is of type array. So one thing is that you can still add values to arrays and objects, but you cannot do this and you cannot add the values to the variables, but you can add values to variables of an array or constant. So this becomes an array. I can add the value here. Again, so numbers dot push 4, that means I'm adding another value to this, which is completely allowed, even though it's constant. So that's some problem with that occurs within it. Okay. So the best practice for variables, which variables to use when? So use constant by default. Use let when assign or reassignment is necessary. Use let when the reassignment is necessary. Nowadays, most common problems or the most latest problems of JavaScript, you would find that they tend to use constant a lot, especially if you go into React.js or AngularJS. Want to learn more about them? Follow my channel. I already have videos on React and I'm working on AngularJS. Hopefully soon we'll be uploading that. Anyway, so we will see that in those examples there are many constants being used. We need to use let wherever we have to do reassignment, means the value needs to be changed. We go further than let variables. Avoid using var unless absolutely needed. Var, because it's an older version, it has more complications, more problems, as I discussed. Because it's a functionally scope, sometimes it just creates more problem. But older developers, older tutorials, older notes online, you would find they use var, because again, this is older go-to things. Nowadays, we tend to avoid it. Okay, so use constant for most cases, let for exceptions, and forget var exists unless you are working with an ancient code base or an older code base. So follow these tips and your code will be cleaner, safer, and more efficient. That's a wrap. You're gonna, if you are still confused, let me know. So from hopefully what you would have learned is the difference between var, let, and constant within the JavaScript variables. Remember, mastering these concepts will make your code much better and your coding life much easier. Okay, so I hope your code becomes cleaner, bug free, and then still, if you have a problem, any confusions, let me know. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this session and your things have become more clear. My name is Dr. Zishan Bhatti, and if you have liked this video, if you find this interesting, please don't forget to subscribe. Give me a comment, give me a feedback. What do you think about it? Okay. Do check out these videos. Right. This is Dr. Zishan signing off.